Hello, friends. If this joke tickled your funny bone, don't forget to hit subscribe. It's an easy way to keep the humor flowing into your feed. Don't miss the last one. That is special joke for you.
Professor X, sitting in his wheelchair, asks a girl, "What is your mutant power?" Girl replies, "I can guess how many pulls to turn a ceiling fan off on the first try." She points up and says, 3 pulls. Professor X stands up and pulls 3 times. After the 3rd pull, the fan turns off. Professor X: "Yeah, that's cool and all, but not really a superpower." Girl: "Yeah, I was just kidding, I can heal paraplegics." Professor X, still standing: "Oh my God." An Australian rugby fan, a South African rugby fan, and a New Zealand rugby fan are all in Saudi Arabia sharing a smuggled crate of booze when Saudi police rush in and arrest them. The mere possession of alcohol is a severe offense in Saudi Arabia, so for consuming the booze, they are all sentenced to death. However, after many months and with the help of good lawyers, they are able successfully to appeal their sentences down to life imprisonment. By a stroke of luck, it was a Saudi national holiday the day their trial finished, and the benevolent sheikh decided they could be released after receiving just 20 lashes. As they were preparing for their punishment, the sheikh announced, "It's my first wife's birthday today, and she has asked me to allow each of you one wish before your whipping." The South African was first. He thought for a while, then said, "Please, tie a pillow to my back." This was done, but the pillow lasted only 10 lashes before the whip went through. When the punishment was done, the South African had to be carried away, bleeding and crying with pain. The Australian was next up. After watching the South African's horror, he said smugly, "Please fix 2 pillows to my back." But even 2 pillows could take only 15 lashes before the whip went through, and the Australian was soon led away whimpering loudly, as they do. The New Zealander was the last one up, but before he could say anything, the sheikh turned to him and said, "You are from a most beautiful part of the world, and your culture is one of the finest. For this, you may have 2 wishes." "Thank you, your most royal and merciful highness," the Kiwi replied. "In recognition of your kindness, my first wish is that you give me not 20 lashes, but 100 lashes." "Not only are you an honorable, handsome, and powerful man, you are also very brave," the sheikh said with an admiring look on his face. "If 100 lashes is what you desire, then so be it. And your second wish, tie the Australian to my back." A Jets fan walks into a bar with his dog. The bartender says, "Hey, bud, no pets allowed in here." The man says, "But wait, this is a special dog. You have to turn on the game to see. When the Jets score, my dog does flips." Sure enough, when the bartender turns on the game, the Jets make a few field goals, and the dog starts flipping and jumping after each kick. "Wow," said the bartender, amazed. "That's great. What does he do when they score a touchdown?" "I don't know. I've only had him for 2 years. A guy was boarding a plane when he heard that the Pope was on the same flight." "This is exciting," thought the gentleman. "I've always been a big fan of the Pope. Perhaps I'll be able to see him in person." Suddenly, the man realized his seat was right next to the Pope himself. Still, the gentleman was too shy to speak to His Holiness. Shortly after takeoff, the Pope took a crossword puzzle out of his carry-on bag and began penciling in the answers. "This is fantastic," the gentleman mused. "I'm really good at crosswords." It crossed his mind that if the Pope got stuck, he'd ask him for assistance. Almost as if Providence struck, the Pope turned to the man and said, "Excuse me, but do you know a 4-letter word referring to a woman that ends in unt?" The 3 cardinals behind, in front of and beside him, shrunk down in their seats as far as possible, all looking for something on the floor. The gentleman was in morbid shock. He couldn't breathe. He went within himself, thought deeper and longer for a plausible answer, and after almost a minute, the dark clouds of evil parted in his mind and the sun shone in. Turning to the Pope, the gentleman said with reverence and politeness, "I believe, Your Holiness, that you're looking for the word ant." "Of course," the Pope mused, not taking his gaze off the crossword. "You wouldn't happen to have an eraser, would you?" Two 95-year-old men, Jack and Sam, are huge baseball fans. One day, Jack falls seriously ill and doesn't have long to live. Sam visits him in the hospital to say goodbye. Sam asks him a favor before he passes. "Hey, Jack, when you get to heaven, can you see if there is baseball there? If there is, tell me. I can certainly try for my best friend." Later that Wednesday night, Jack passed away. Thursday night, Sam is asleep in bed when all of a sudden Jack's spirit appears in front of him. Who are you?" Calm down, calm down. It's me, Jack." "Good hell, you scared me half to death." "It's okay, but I've come with good news and bad news." "Well, what's the good news then?" pondered Sam. "There is baseball in heaven." "Thank goodness," said Sam, feeling wonderful. "But what's the bad news?" "You're pitching Tuesday." There were 3 guys in an airplane. One guy dropped a rock, another dropped a brick, and the last dropped a grenade. When they got back on the ground, they were walking down the street, and they saw a woman crying. Being the gentlemen they are, they went up to ask her why she was crying. She said, "A rock fell from the sky, landed on my cat, and now my cat is dead." The men said they were very sorry to hear that and walked away. The next house they came across, a little further down the road, there was another woman crying. Being the gentlemen they are, they walk up to her and ask her why she was crying. She said, "A brick fell from the sky, landed on my dog, and now my dog is dead." The men said they were very sorry to hear that and walked away. The next house they came across, a little further down the road, there was a man laughing his head off. Wondering what was so funny, they went up to ask him. After they asked him, he replied, "I bent over to get the newspaper this morning. I farted, and my whole house blew up." Dan was a single guy living at home with his father and working in the family business. When he found out he was going to inherit a fortune when his sickly father died, he decided he needed to find a wife with whom to share his fortune. One evening, at an investment meeting, he spotted the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Her natural beauty took his breath away. "I may look like an ordinary guy," he said to her, "but in just a few years my father will die and I will inherit $200 million. Impressed, the woman asked for his business card. 3 days later, she became his stepmother. Women are so much better at financial planning than men. 2 brick masons are laying a wall when suddenly one of the bricks starts to talk. When the masons start to talk to the brick, he seems just like a regular guy telling the masons about his ambitions to go and get an education so that he's not forgotten like the rest of his brethren. Then he asks the masons to go with him and get an education too so that they won't have to do this hard work anymore. When they hear this, they are taken aback, saying that they'll have to take the rest of the day off to make a decision. Coming back the next day, the masons find the brick and start talking to it, and after a while, the brick asks if they've made a decision, and the masons reply that they're sorry, but we don't need any education. And though they like him, all in all, you're just another brick in the wall. An airplane had 100 bricks in it. 1 brick falls out. How many are left? 99, of course. What are the 3 steps to put an elephant in the fridge? 1. Open the door. 2. Put the elephant in. 3. Close the door. What are the 3 steps to put a horse in the fridge? 1. Open the door. 2. Take the elephant out. 3. Put the horse in. 4. Close the door. It was a lioness's birthday party, and since she was a very social lion, she invited every animal in the world to come. Who didn't make it? Why, the horse. It couldn't get out of the fridge with its doors. A little old lady was walking through a swamp infested with crocodiles, and no one who went in there came back out uninjured before. However, the old lady made it through just fine. Why? Because the crocodiles were all at the party. Later, The little old lady was walking through a meadow in a park, but was rushed to the hospital just a few minutes later. Why was that? Because the brick fell on her. An older white-haired man walked into a jewelry store one Friday with his beautiful young girlfriend at his side. The jeweler looked through his stock and brought out a $5,000 ring and showed it to him. The old man said, "I don't think you understand. I want something very special." At that statement, the jeweler went to his special stock and brought another ring over. "Here's a stunning ring at only $40,000, the jeweler said. The young lady's eyes sparkled, and her whole body trembled with excitement. The old man, seeing this, said, "We'll take it." The jeweler asked how payment would be made, and the old man stated, "By check. I know you need to make sure my check is good, so I'll write it now, and you can call the bank on Monday to verify the funds, and I'll pick up the ring Monday afternoon," he said. Monday morning, a very teed-off jeweler called the old man. "There's no money in that account." "I know," said the old man. "But can you imagine the weekend I just had?" Upon arriving at the pyramid, they are immediately told to leave as the site has already been excavated. The friends, not willing to concede, look for a different way in and find an entrance never before used. It is through this entrance that they find a secret passageway, one that is made at first to look like a dead end but is truly a turn in the hallway. They venture around this turn and into a great room. In this room are torches. A sign just inside the room warns, "He who lights this shall burn to death." The first friend takes a torch and lights the end. The friends venture through the room to another. In this second room is a small lake with a small canoe, able to seat 3. In the canoe is a paddle that reads, "He who uses this shall die a watery death." The second friend takes this paddle and uses it to guide the 3 of them to the other side of the lake and through a third and final door. In this last room is a great atrium, filled with heaps upon heaps of golden artifacts and jewels. The 3 friends rush in and come to a golden sarcophagus. The third friend looks at it and sees that it has the warning, "The first man to touch this treasure shall die a most terrible death," written on its exterior. The third friend, giving the message no care, proceeds to pick up as much gold as he can. His friends quickly follow suit. Many months later, after the friends returned home with their money and used it to live lucrative lives, the third friend received troubling news. The first friend had been sleeping when his mansion had caught fire and burned to the ground, killing him. Remembering the warning, he calls the second friend, but they both laugh it off. A month later, the third friend is watching the news when a breaking story comes on. It is his second friend who had been out on his yacht. The boat had inexplicably capsized, killing him. The third friend saw this and grew terribly fearful, assuming he had a month left before whatever horror would befall him. The third friend sold many of his belongings to afford the most secure underground bunker. He then used his remaining fortune to buy an incredibly high-tech security system, cameras all over, and 30-plus armed guards stationed at the entrance. The third friend spent a month in the bunker. 30 days passed, and night was falling when the third friend looked to the security cameras outside of the bunker. At the entrance was an empty expanse of land, save one object. All the security guards were mysteriously gone, and just in frame was the silhouette of a sarcophagus. The third friend panicked. Rushing to the door, he pushed all manners of furniture before it. A fridge, a bookshelf, his bed, a desk. But once he had placed the final barricade, a great pounding game went to the door. Looking at security footage, the sarcophagus had begun to float and was using itself as a battering ram. To the third friend's horror, the door began to crack. With a tremendous boom, the door and all the furniture were blasted away. The third friend screamed as there in the doorway floated the sarcophagus. He ran through the bunker, stalking by the sarcophagus. The friend jumped into the bathroom and locked the door behind him. There he sat on the toilet and cried, "Boom!" The sarcophagus was there, breaking through the bathroom door. The third friend panicked, running to the sink as the sarcophagus inched forward. The friend picked up a bottle of shampoo and went through it. The sarcophagus kept coming and went. He threw a can of shaving cream. The sarcophagus was within 10 feet of him now. He threw a tube of toothpaste. The sarcophagus was within arm's length. The friend made one final attempt. He reached into the cabinet, grabbed a plastic bottle filled with a green liquid, and threw it. The sarcophagus fell to the ground and turned to dust. The man marveled at this. Looking for the last thing he had thrown, he picked it up and thought, all I had to do was take some NyQuil, and the coffin would stop. A family was having some neighbors over for a dinner party. Everything was going swimmingly. Annabelle and her family were charming and fun. The guests were entertained, and the appetizers were delicious. Even the house was spotless. Finally, the time came for everyone to gather at the dinner table for the promised meal. At the table, Annabelle turned to Lizzie, her 6-year-old daughter, and, in an attempt to impress the guests, said, "Dear, would you like to say the blessing?" "I wouldn't know what to say," replied the little girl shyly. "Just say what you hear Mommy say, sweetie," Annabelle said. Lizzie took a deep breath, bowed her head, and solemnly said, "Dear Lord, why did I invite all these people to dinner?" He wakes up the next morning to find that he has lost his credit card. He needs to get it back, but he got so drunk that he doesn't remember which bar he ended up at. The only thing he remembers is that the bar had a golden toilet. He walks downtown and goes into one bar and asks the bartender, "Excuse me, I know this is a weird question, but do you happen to have a golden toilet here?" "A golden toilet? I don't think so," the bartender said, giving him a strange look. The man walked into another bar. "Excuse me, you don't happen to have a golden toilet here, do you?" said Derek. "A golden toilet, huh? Don't be ridiculous." This continues all day until finally Derek walks into a bar all the way on the other side of town. He asks the bartender, "Excuse me, I know this is going to sound strange, but do you have a golden toilet here? I got really drunk last night and left my credit card at a bar with a golden toilet." The bartender smiles, turns around, and yells, "Hey, Bob, I think we found the guy who took a shot in your tuba." After 15 years of marriage, my wife wanted me to take another woman out to dinner and a movie. She said, "I love you, but I know this other woman loves you and would love to spend some time with you." The other woman that my wife wanted me to visit was my mother, who had been a widow for 10 years, but the demands of my work and my 2 children had made it possible to visit her only occasionally. That night I called to invite her to go out for dinner and a movie. "What's wrong? Are you well?" she asked. My mother is the type of woman who suspects that late night's call or surprise invitation is a sign of bad news. "I thought that it would be pleasant to spend some time with you," I responded. "Just the 2 of us." She thought about it for a moment and then said, "I would like that very much." That Friday after work, as I drove over to pick her up, I was a bit nervous. When I arrived at her house, I noticed that she, too, seemed nervous about our date. She waited in the door with her coat on. She had curled her hair and was wearing the dress that she had worn to celebrate her last wedding anniversary. She smiled from a face that was as radiant as an angel's. "I told my friends that I was going to go out with my son, and they were impressed," she said as she got into the car. "I can't wait to hear about our meeting." We went to a restaurant that, although not elegant, was very nice and cozy. My mother took my arm as if she were the first lady. After we sat down, I had to read the menu. Her eyes could only read large print. Halfway through the entries, I lifted my eyes and saw Mom sitting there staring at me. A nostalgic smile was on her lips. "It was I who used to have to read the menu when you were small," she said. Then it's time that you relax and let me return the favor, I responded. During the dinner, we had an agreeable conversation. Nothing extraordinary, but catching up on recent events of each other's lives. We talked so much that we missed the movie. As we arrived at her house later, she said, "I'll go out with you again, but only if you let me invite you." I agreed. "How was your dinner date?" asked my wife when I got home. "Very nice." "Much more so than I could have imagined," I answered. A few days later, my mother died of a massive heart attack. It happened so suddenly that I didn't have a chance to do anything for her. Sometime later, I received an envelope with a copy of a restaurant receipt from the same place where my mother and I had dined. An attached note said, "I paid this bill in advance. I wasn't sure that I could be there. But nevertheless, I paid for 2 plates, one for you and the other for your wife. You will never know what that night meant for me. I love you, son." At that moment, I understood the importance of saying undone, "I love you," and to give our loved ones the time that they deserve. Nothing in life is more important than your family. Give them the time they deserve, because these things cannot be put off till some other time. A doctor pressed the bell to call the nurse. After a few rings with no response, he rang it again. Finally, the nurse hurriedly appeared, slightly out of breath. As she arrived, the doctor noticed something unusual. Her shirt's top 3 buttons were undone, revealing a bit more than expected. The doctor, concerned but trying to keep things professional, said, "Hey, why are your, melons on display? And why are these buttons open?" Without missing a beat, the nurse, still catching her breath, replied, "Oh, don't mind it, doctor. You know, these medical students have such bad habits. No matter how many times I tell them, they just leave things open after using them." In the piece, there's a long passage of about 20 minutes during which the bass violinists have nothing to do. Rather than sit around that whole time, some bass players decided to sneak off stage and go to the tavern next door for a quick one. After slamming down several beers in quick succession, one of them looked at his watch. "Hey, we need to get back," he said. "No need to panic," said a fellow bass player. "I thought we might need some extra time, so I tied the last few pages of the conductor's score together with string. It'll take him a few minutes to get it untangled." A few moments later, they staggered back to the concert hall and took their places in the orchestra. About this time, a member of the audience noticed the conductor seemed a bit edgy and said as much to her companion. "Well, of course," said her companion. "Don't you see? It's the bottom of the 9th. The score is tied and the bassists are loaded." So a man walks up to the department store counter. "2 pairs of underwear, please." The man behind the counter looks at him in disbelief. "Only 2 pairs of underwear?" "Yup, I wear one while the other is in the wash." The man behind the counter looks at him in disgust, then rings out his order. A second man walks in. "5 pairs of underwear, please." "Only 5, eh?" "Yeah, I wear one for every weekday, then go commando all the weekend." The man behind the counter shakes his head. "Well, you're better than the last guy." A third man walks in. "7 pairs of underwear, please." Finally, a man who knows hygiene. "Yes, I do try one for every day, and I do my laundry on Sunday." At the end of the day, a fourth man walks into the underwear department. "12 pairs of underwear, please." "Wow, you must be really clean." The man smiles. "Yup, that's me. Hang on, let me see if I counted right. January, February, March, April." 2 guys, one old and one young, are pushing their carts around the grocery store when they collide. The old guy says to the young guy, "Sorry about that, I'm looking for my wife, and I guess I wasn't paying attention to where I was going." The young guy says, "That's okay. It's a coincidence I'm looking for my wife, too. I can't find her, and I'm getting a little desperate." The old guy says, "Well, maybe I can help you find her. What does she look like? Well, she is 27 years old, tall, with red hair, blue eyes, and long legs, and is wearing a tank top with short white shorts. What does your wife look like? The old guy replies, It doesn't matter. Let's look for yours. By the time the soldier pulled into the little town, every hotel room was taken. You've got to have a room somewhere, he pleaded, with a proprietor. Well, I do have a double room with one occupant, but he is an Air Force guy, admitted the manager, and he might be glad to split the cost. But to tell you the truth, he snores so loudly that people in adjoining rooms have complained in the past. I'm not sure it'd be worth it to you. No problem, the tired Army guy assured him. I'll take it. The next morning, the soldier came down to breakfast, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. How'd you sleep? Asked the manager. Never better, said the soldier. The manager was impressed. No problem with the other guy snoring all night long. No, I shut him up in no time, explained the soldier. How'd you manage that? Asked the proprietor. Well, he was already in bed, snoring away when I walked into the room, so I gave him a kiss on the cheek, explained the soldier. Then I whispered in his ear, Good night, beautiful, and he sat up all night watching me. While driving it off the lot, she decides to take it on the highway and really open things up. She hits the speed limit of 70 miles per hour and continues to accelerate 75 miles per hour, 80 miles per hour, and out of nowhere, a siren and the flashing lights of a patrol car come into view of her rearview mirror. Thinking her new car could easily outrun the police, she speeds up further until she's going well over 120 miles per hour, but the cop is still in pursuit. Realizing how stupid she is being, she slows down and pulls over. The cop pulls behind her, gets out, and storms over to the car. The woman is so distraught and apologizes profusely and explains that she had just bought the car and made the dumbest mistake of her life. Feeling pity, and it being at the end of his shift, the cop says that if the woman can make him laugh, he'll let her go without reprimand. Thinking for a moment, she responds, Well, sir, about a week ago my husband left me for a sheriff, and I thought you were trying to bring him back. A woman walked into the clinic, her face twisted in discomfort, and instead of taking a seat in a chair, she carefully lowered herself onto the floor with a groan. The doctor, puzzled by her actions, asked, Why don't you sit up here on the exam table? The woman, still wincing from her pain, shook her head and replied, Doctor, it's from sitting up too much that I got into this condition. In the office, one colleague noticed his friend's phone buzzing incessantly with, I love you messages. Curiosity getting the better of him, he asked, Hey, what's with all the I love you texts? Are you in the middle of some romantic adventure? The friend chuckled, shaking his head. Oh, you wouldn't believe it, he said with a grin. I accidentally grabbed my wife's phone this morning instead of mine. On a frigid winter night, the power had gone out in a quaint village home, leaving the house shrouded in darkness. There was a knock on the door. Trembling, she called out, her voice quivering, Who's there? A man's voice replied, It's your husband, Bob. Her heart raced as panic surged through her. Her breath hitched, and her eyes widened in shock. Oh, no, she gasped. If it's you, then who's inside? A woman with a keen eye for antiques was strolling through a quaint little shop when she spotted something extraordinary. The shopkeeper was casually feeding milk to a cat in a bowl that the woman instantly recognized as a rare and ancient Chinese artifact, easily worth at least $30,000. Seeing the priceless bowl being used so carelessly, she couldn't believe her luck. Surely the shopkeeper had no idea of its true value. Feigning disinterest, she approached the counter. Excuse me, sir, she said with a friendly smile. That's a lovely cat you have. Would you be willing to sell her to me? The shopkeeper hesitated, stroking his chin. Well, she's been with me for a while. But if you really want her, I suppose I could let her go for $50. Without a second thought, the woman pulled out the money and handed it over, thrilled at the bargain. As she turned to leave with the cat in her arms, she paused and glanced back casually. "Oh, by the way," she added, "I suppose that old bowl won't be of much use to you now. Why don't you just throw it in? I'll need something to feed the cat with, after all." The shopkeeper's eyes twinkled as he grinned knowingly. "Ah, I'm afraid I can't do that, ma'am," he said with a sly smile. "You see, thanks to that bowl, I've sold 300 cats so far." One day, while lovingly massaging her husband's head, the wife smiled and asked, "You know, I've been giving you head massages every day since we got married. But tell me, who used to do this for you before we tied the knot?" The husband, enjoying the soothing touch, couldn't help but chuckle. With a mischievous grin, he replied, "Well, before we got married, I never had a headache." A man in Scotland calls his son in London the day before Christmas Eve and says, "I hate to ruin your day, but I have to tell you that your mother and I are divorcing. 45 years of misery is enough." "Dad, what are you talking about?" the son screams. "We can't stand the sight of each other any longer," the father says. "We're sick of each other, and I'm sick of talking about this, so you call your sister in Leeds and tell her." Frantically, the son calls his sister, who explodes on the phone. "Like hell, they're getting divorced," she shouts. "I'll take care of this." She calls Scotland immediately and screams at her father, "You are not getting divorced. Don't do a single thing until I get there. I'm calling my brother back, and we'll both be there tomorrow. Until then, don't do a thing. Do you hear me?" And hangs up. The old man hangs up his phone and turns to his wife. "Sorted. They're coming for Christmas, and they're paying their own way."
If you're still here, I'm thrilled you enjoyed the joke. Subscribing is a simple way to stay connected. Join our community and make me a happy friend.